In case you were ever a child or who longed to be a princess or a queen, here's a bit of perspective. Do excuse the language used. The king is a lustful man. If I'm not in my apartment when he comes, he will fuck one of my maidservants to kill time while he waits for me. They say it is my temper that makes it hard for me to keep a maid, but the truth is that most of them fall pregnant and have to be pensioned off. He used to have Louise in the morning, and me after lunch, make a duty visit to his wife, and then expect me to be ready for him, hot and willing, after supper. We could never be sick, or tired, or heaven forbid have a headache. He will not wait for me to recover from giving birth. If I'm not ready to bed him, he will simply find another woman.
I love to read a book and be absorbed in words to escape.
This is my review on Bitter Greens by Kate Forsyth, and you might notice that I'm sitting, well, you might not be able to see it at the moment. Hello! I'm sitting in front of my other bookshelf. I thought this was more apt given that this is an adult title, not YA, and it's also somewhat of a fairy tale retelling, and they live up there, so I thought I should probably sit in front of this bookcase. Now, I was very unsure as to whether or not I'd be able to construct a review for this title, simply because I had a very hard time while reading it. Now, I should say that I very much appreciated the book. I enjoyed it in moments, certainly, but I don't know if I would be able to say with confidence that I enjoyed the novel as a whole, simply because I perceived it to contain a fair amount of content that I really struggled to get through emotionally. I was saddened and angered by a lot of the content within the book, but that is not to indicate that I question its necessity and its thematic resonance and all that kind of thing, and its need to be in the novel. I fully appreciate that all of the stuff I really struggled to get through served a wider purpose and served the plot and served the characters and was completely and utterly worthy of being included in the book, and I'm not wanting to dismiss that or question it or say that it should be purged from the novel. I don't think that at all. I'm just saying that as a reader and as a person, it's the kind of themes and events that I have a really hard time reading about. I will link the video in which I kind of expanded upon what those issues were. I'll try not to talk about them too much during this review, because I want to focus on the other aspects of the book that are equally, if not more, important. And I was determined, no matter what I was feeling throughout the read, that I would finish this book. I spent $36 on this thing. Plot-wise, okay, this is a historical fiction with some fantasy in it, a bit of a Rapunzel retelling woven in there, and it's time slips back and forth between 3 different time periods, 2 of which overlap somewhat, and it's focused on 3 female protagonists. I would say probably our main protagonist perhaps might be Charlotte Rose, who is a real-life figure and was in fact my favourite character in the book, which is interesting given that she really did live, and she kind of bookends the novel, and I suppose her story essentially forms the basic structure in which we interweave the other 2 storylines that we follow. And she is banished from the court of the Sun King, Louis the... don't know my Roman numerals, but that King Louis, and sent to live in a convent. And so her journey kind of sets up the theme of entrapment and imprisonment that kind of governs the lives of the 3 female characters in the book, and of course is like an allusion to the Rapunzel narrative as well. And while she's there, she is told the story of the Rapunzel character, whose name is Margarita, and through Margarita's tale we meet the Wicked Witch, whose name is Selina, and then we hear her story as well. And so they go back and forth between them, and so you get to meet these 3 quite different women and their lives and their backstory. But it was all very interesting and very detailed, and the atmosphere for all of the places and settings and situations that we were in, it was all very vast and interesting and rich and detailed and lovely. The atmosphere, rather, throughout the book was really well maintained. So I found that all of the 3 lead women were interesting in their own way, but for some reason I think Charlotte Rose just spoke to me a little bit more. I suppose because we get to know her first, really, and so you're kind of more familiar with her plight from early on, so you're kind of automatically on her side. When it comes to meeting Selina, who is the Wicked Witch, it takes a little while to, because you know her as a villain before you know her backstory, so that, you know, took a little while for me to, I knew that eventually, you know, this horrible person must have had a really rough time in her childhood or something, and that certainly was the case. But I was very remiss and reluctant to want to get, you know, behind her and support her in any way, because, you know, I'd come to know her as the woman who'd kidnapped Margarita as a little child, and thinking, oh, well, you're not very cool, are ya? It's really difficult to separate my emotional responses from this review. But I marked them with pages with colour coordination as to my emotions, and the red were all the moments that for me connotated to events of either rape or sexual assault or coercion, and that was just what I perceived. Whenever it was mentioned or whenever it occurred, the yellow were the moments that I thought were really sexist, not in terms of the writing, but in terms of what characters were saying to one another and stuff. The green, I actually can't remember what green was meant to mean. Oh dear. And the blue were moments where there was like really cool feminist statements made, almost always by Charlotte Rose, which is probably another reason why I really like her as a character. But I colour coordinated just to remember what my emotions were at the time. One of the things I felt was really interesting, actually, in terms of how uncomfortable I was during the reading of the book, was that there was, for me, a really, really palpable sense of foreshadowing and impending doom looming over the structure of the entire novel, and individually for each of the three ladies' narratives too. And I think that actually I associate that very much with the constructs and the trappings of a fairy tale format. Often with fairy tales, I think you'll find that you get the sense from the outset that there's a lot of events leading to an inevitable conclusion, sort of thing, and it has to lead to a really bad spot, obviously, for things to be resolved and everything to be redeemed and goodness to win out and all the happy stuff to happen. You need to be led to something really terrible. And so I kept feeling that that was being perpetuated throughout the novel as a whole. Especially because we open with Charlotte Rose already, it opens with her getting led to the convent, so she's getting imprisoned there. So you know that that is going to happen, so everything else is backstory leading to that. So you're getting led to all the bad stuff that will eventually result in her imprisonment. You know that when you go back and you meet the character of Selina, you know that she's going to end up being the Wicked Witch figure. So, of course, things have to lead to her being mistreated or suffering a great deal in order for her to get to a place where she is compelled to want to become that sort of person and to practice the black arts and all that kind of thing. So, again, you know that you're leading towards something really big and bad. The interesting thing was within the fairy tale, direct kind of fairy tale narrative, which was Margarita's story, the Rapunzel narrative, I could pinpoint stuff because I knew it was taking the plot points from the original version of Rapunzel, wherein she's discovered her alliance with the prince is found out because she's impregnated by him, and the Wicked Witch mother figure notices that her belly is swelling because she's pregnant, and that's how he gets found out and gets, you know, blinded, and Rapunzel gets thrown out of the tower, and then they have to meet up and stuff. So I knew that was going to happen. So there were a really distinct fairy tale checkpoints that were occurring and that I could see occurring from far off. And so there was an element of predictability to the novel and to that story in particular, but it wasn't in a negative sense. It was just something that it evoked the really familiar aspects that come with a fairy tale story. As I said earlier, I really appreciated the detail within the story, and often it was the detail that was getting me upset, because very vivid portrayals of Venice and Florence and Versailles and all those cities at that particular time in history. You could see the extremes of poverty and degradation and whatnot that people lived in, always being like starkly contrasted to the opulence and ridiculous wealth and privilege and whatnot of royalty and life at court. Something to note about the structure of the book: its contents put into sections, and within the sections are chapters, and they always note the date, the year, and the location for each chapter within the sections. But the sections themselves are broken down into musical terminology. So we've got prelude, cantata, interlude, reverie, lament, nocturne, rhapsody, fugue, fantasia, and postlude. So I thought that was a nice way to structure it, and also with each section, it's like little poems relating to Rapunzel. And for the most part, I think all of the time weaving back and forth flowed really well. It was quite fluid and made sense. Yeah, that felt effective and nice and continual, and it was good stuff. In terms of characters that I like, I mentioned that I really just grew to care for Charlotte Rose a great deal. She had a lot of humour. I liked her sense of humour a lot. I liked her banter that she had with everybody at court, and even as a child I liked her spirit. And she was considered a great wit, and she was a fantastic storyteller, so she had her own kind of qualities that she could bring to the table. But they weren't the stereotypical ones associated with women at court, especially. Well, Margarita, obviously, she's the Rapunzel figure, so you're going to feel bad for her. She's locked up in a tower, no doors and stuff. I do very much admired her resilience, especially towards the end of her story, and what she had to do on her own and struggle through on her own, and I was like, oh, poor thing. I perpetually just wanted to give her a cuddle. The character of Selina, it was interesting because obviously I knew who she became, and I really disapproved of her later actions, and I still don't think that her former life was justified in what she chose to do, and I don't think it was meant to be, but definitely her childhood was horrible. Ultimately, I found Selina's journey interesting, if not very, very difficult to witness and observe, but I don't know if I could necessarily say that I empathized with her all that much, but I certainly could recognize the hell that she'd been through, and note how that would affect her and the decisions she makes later. I can't say too much about this because it would be a big spoiler, but one of the characters that I was really enjoying and appreciating throughout the book ends up having a twist that makes me rethink my opinions on other characters in the story. That should be nice and ambiguous, so yeah, okay, good. I mainly just wanted to push the king down a well and then set him on fire or something. I really hated the king. I don't want to generalize because I'm going to sound like this evil, sexist, feminist bitch person. I had a hard time trusting any of the male characters in the novel. Two of the notable men we were meeting, at least early on, were not very nice, and then that kind of I had my guard up for the rest of the book. Charlotte Rose is almost raped with a hairbrush, making it sound also negative, but it's not. I mean, it did its job in terms of being a really gripping story and engaging me because I was so upset. And I'm certainly not denying that it was crafted really well, and I loved the atmosphere, and the characters were all vivid in their own right. In terms of structure, it was really beautifully done and flowed very seamlessly into one another, and I think the overall mood that it evoked and the fairy tale feel for the whole novel was really superb and well maintained and stuff. So I don't want to give off this air of I hated the book because it made me upset, because that's not true. I hated how upset and angry I got, but I recognized that that is probably apt. If you do enjoy fairy tale retellings, if you like historical fiction, then I'd certainly pick it up. I think it was very well written. I'm just too sensitive, you see. I would certainly give it a very solid 4.5 out of 5. If we're just disregarding the fact that I have emotions that are ridiculous, I will certainly give it 4.5 stars out of 5. The Bitter Greens by Kate Forsyth.